so then we can get underway. So with that done, it is my great privilege to introduce to you tonight a man that I'm sure will require very little introduction. Certainly by way of his face, but hopefully for a number of you, his CV. And it's very rare to introduce someone as a range of accolades as Sir Ray Avery, from an award-winning author to an incredible entrepreneur and philanthropist. He's a knight. He has made a contribution to emerging markets through innovation in medicine in an incomparable basis. Not only is Sir Ray an incredible ambassador for New Zealand, but his work around the world with emerging technologies and an unrelentless passion to make a difference to the world is something that I think you'll all really enjoy. Sir Ray is also probably our greatest contributor to Spark Lab. He's this last couple of weeks been through Hamilton, he's been in Wellington, he's here again with us this evening, and I think this is the 6th time that Sir Ray has contributed to Spark Lab. So with that, Sir Ray, lovely to have you back. Thank you. And so tonight will very much be a chat. That's the way it works with Sir Ray, and let me start right back at the beginning to help set the context for everyone in the room. Because you're not born in New Zealand, are you, Sir Ray?
No, I was born in the UK, and the other day I actually pulled up a picture on the internet of one of the places that I was billeted at as an orphan in the UK, and it was a real shithouse. I mean, it was horrible. It really was. It was. I mean, I don't know if people could live in it. It was you know. You've probably seen those TV programs. Anybody seen those TV programs about the UK where they're renovating a house in the UK and they say, this room's big? You know, it's a shoebox. I mean, this place was 2 up, 2 down. You could walk out the back. And I used to remember getting a bath off the back door and on Friday nights being able to have a bath, and you had to fill it up with a kettle, you know. So that was not a good starting point in terms of, you know, the education system. So, but I was brought up in orphanages in the UK, and they were challenging places because nobody was prepared for all of these kids that were a product of the bombing and the war. We were all sent down to southern England because of the bombing, and there were broken marriages, and I was really one of the kids that was a product of a broken marriage, and so it all hurtled together, and nothing worked, you know. But I tried to make the best of all of those kind of things. One thing that was very pivotal, which is important for you guys, is that at school nobody really looked after us, and so I needed glasses because I was short-sighted, so nobody checked me for glasses, so I couldn't see what was on the board. And then I had acute glue ear because of the poor living conditions, so I couldn't hear what they were saying. So when they asked me a question, I had no idea what they were talking about. So they knew I was dumb and retarded, so they put me to the back of the class and left me alone. And that was the best thing that could ever happen to a human being, because it gave me one skill that I've got that I use every day that makes me a game changer, and that is the power of observation. Because that's the way I saw the world, just through visual acuity. And every single innovation in the whole world comes about through that one moment of innovation, observation, and seeing things in differently. So, but also it made me resilient because, you know, people worry about failure. You know, they think, you know, well, I'm going to fail if I start something. And I really pretty much, by the time I was about 14, all the things that could happen to you that were bad in your life had happened to me. So I was pretty much fearless, and I thought, no, nobody can frighten me. Not until the Christchurch earthquake, but that was another story.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people have said, I didn't come from a privileged background, therefore I didn't get a fair chance, therefore I haven't gone on to succeed. But you had the opposite.
Well, I knew how lucky I was in that my life was rubbish. My mum and dad, my father was in the British Expeditionary Force that went over to France to sort of check out how many Germans were there, and promptly got caught and captured and spent 5 years in a prisoner of war camp. And when he got back to good old Blighty, he met my mum in a pub, and he was quite clearly up for a party, and so apparently was my mum. And I was the result. They didn't like each other, so they put me into orphanages. So from those orphanage years, I learned to survive, you know, as a human being, because they were very brutal. But they were also very badly run. You know, we used to grow our own vegetables and then cook them and serve them to people that were looking after us. That just didn't seem right to me. Anyway, there's a whole lot. So I'd just run away. So I started to run away, and at the age of ran away for the first time at 7, and it was like a catch-22. I practiced running away from 7 to the age of 14. At the age of 14, I ran away for good and set up shop under a railway bridge in London. And that was when my education started, because what I know about education is that the current education system is absolutely flawed, and it creates a culture of non-innovators. You have the innovation educated out of you at school. You know, when you go to preschool, you can open all the drawers at preschool and play with things, you know, just, oh, it's great, you know. But then you go to proper school, and the idea of proper school was actually predicated in the Industrial Revolution, where we needed lots of people to service the factories, to manage the factories. So you had to have numeracy to be able to calculate how many bales of hay went through the machine or how many kilos of coal, and you had to have literacy to be able to read all the instructions. And that became the paramount education system. It still pervades today. Everywhere in the world, you know, you have mathematics and literature, and innovation and team building is nowhere to be seen on the curriculum. You might get a bit of creativity at the bottom with your music, you know, dance and music. It's got nothing to do with creating people that are fit for the society of tomorrow. The society of tomorrow in 2050, we're going to need all of our collegiate intelligentsia to make a bit of a fist of what we're going to face. But we've actually educated out the dreaming and the innovation. And what we did when in the education system was worse, because what we did was we started metrics. And the idea of the metrics was that that would see if there were any kids that needed help. But it suddenly got transformed into a no-go gauge. So now NZ, you know, whatever it is, is the process by which you get judged. And that sets up a process when you go to your first job, you're in competition with people. Great companies build teams of people, but our education system actually breeds people who are secularly individual, who believe that they have to compete against each other because we set this metric that you have to compete to. So we've got to fix that. And so what I do in companies is re-educate companies in terms of let's all work together. There's not one single person in this room who's as clever as all of us. So if we can all work together, and in fact, if we could do this today, I bet you this would happen. If we could get all of you guys in a room and find a common problem that we need to solve, we could. And we could make a fist of it and make a big amount of money. And that's the trick. That's the trick about entrepreneurs who have an idea and then find a team of people. I'm a polymath. I know a lot of shit, you know. Because what I did in the when I ran away, my education system was actually predicated on the great tomes of wisdom that were in the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is like Google today. Because I just go to the library and read the Encyclopedia Britannica. So I know a lot of shit about, I can do really well on one of those quizzes, you know, I know shit, you know. So that's why I was mildly successful, because I didn't need other people and I didn't trust other people. So I started to do it on my own. But then when I got bigger and better and more sane, I actually started to build teams of people, because I knew that we could do things on a global scale. And particularly in New Zealand, which is a very unique environment, and we can actually do things that change the world.
So take us back to your sleeping under bridges in London. How does it unfold from there?
Well, I was, you know, getting out of the orphanage was brilliant, because they were shocking, you know, one pair of pants and, you know, 2 pairs of shorts and, you know, and it was awful. So I ran away and I set up shop under a railway bridge in London. And it was brilliant, because I'd go to the Tate Art Gallery and look at what was going on there. I'd go to the Science Museum, and I'd go to the read the library every day and teach myself to read, and it was brilliant. The only problem with all of that was that you need more than that if you're going to be a good human being. And I had no social conscience, social guiding principles in my life. I didn't have a mum, a dad, any sisters, any brothers. So I sat down and decided that I would plan my life. And one of the things that's a problem for us as a species is that we're the only species on the planet that know we're going to die, but does nothing about it. Because you just keep on writing those checks, and I know tomorrow. I know I've got about 4,725 days left to live. I've calculated that, the amount of Chardonnay I drink. But the reality is, I've got a plan for what I want to do with my life. I've always had a plan, and that's why I've been moderately successful. If you ain't got a plan, think about starting a business. Would you start a business and say, I've got this life and I got a business and I'm going to start it. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. I won't even plan it. If you have a proper business, what you do is you actually plan the aims and ambitions of that company. You put the right team around you, you invest the right amount of money, you find the people that can invest in that business, and you certainly have an exit strategy. And that exit strategy, if you're really smart when you start a business, this is the best advice I can give you for starting a business, is don't think about the starting of that business, but thinking about the exit strategy of that business. How are you going to exit that business? Because it will change the way that you manage and design that business. So if you want to do an IPO versus a trade sale, the way that you structure that business will be totally different. Okay? So, but think about that and transform that into your life. None of that's going on. You're just going on and suddenly you're going to die. And for most of you, it'll be a big bloody surprise, It won't be for me. But the other thing that happens when you have a plan is that you become successful because you start having good metrics. You set yourself objectives for doing something and you try and meet those objectives. And if you don't do that, your life's open to random events. Somebody might be from Wellington right now and they've come down to wonderful Dunedin and they go out for a bit of a Chinese after this. They meet this girl in a Chinese restaurant. Before you know it, you're living in Dunedin. And that's what happens generally in life. There's no, people are a bit mad. Don't get me started on Trump. But the point is that if you have a plan, you can actually be more successful. So what I'd encourage you to do is go home tonight, do the maths and say, well, you were all born with about 30,000 days. That's all you got, on average, about 30,000 days. And then do the maths and say, if you want to be sailing around the South Pacific when you're 55, then you need to plan for it now. And you need to think about what that life plan is about. It doesn't have to be dramatic. I know I'm going to die, but I don't go every morning think, shit, might as well commit suicide because I'm going to die. I want to tear up that passage of time before that. I want to change the world for millions of people. That's my dream.
So give us, so you're under a bridge, with respect.
Yeah.
You write a plan for yourself. Stage one was what? Where did you begin?
Well, what happened was I was lucky. You always have a bit of luck in your life sometimes. Firstly, I was intellectually damaged because of all the stuff that had gone on. So I didn't know about what the social fabric should be like. So I didn't have a mum, I didn't have a dad, I didn't have sisters and brothers. So my only touchstones for how life would work were the periodicals I was delivering on a Thursday to the council houses. On Thursday, we used to deliver all the periodicals to the councils, and the first one was Women's Own, 1953. Brilliant! Because if you've read Women's Own, 1953, you knew what falling in love was about. You did, because your heart would be pounding in your chest, you'd hear music in your ear, you'd see bambies jumping around, and you'd fall in love, and you would be in love, and it would be fantastic. My second touchstone was Playboy magazine, and so this didn't play out well. This did not play out well. And that was the problem, you see. So I had intellect, but I didn't know how to manage it all. But I was lucky. I cut my leg and it got infected, and I ended up being picked up and taken to hospital. I fell asleep on a train and I was picked up, and I woke up to this grizzled teacher called Jack Wise, and he said, look, you've run away from the orphanages so many times, we're going to have to send you to Borstal. Or you can come down to Southern England with me, take an internship in Agricultural Research College as an intern. It's like Borstal with grass. So I'll do that. And this was a change of my life, because these were all career academics. They'd been educated at Cambridge and Oxford, ex-Battle of Britain pilots. Many of them had their own castles. And they just did a Pygmalion on me. They said, good Lord, Ray, you can't talk properly. No idea what breed or what it's wine. We're going to have to educate you. So they gave me this huge knowledge of not just the beginning of a scientific education, but a cultural education. And that was the starting point for me to better start businesses, because giving all of that knowledge to a guy coming into puberty was like giving Semtex to a serial bomber, because I made my first plans. My first plans at the age of 14 were to be a millionaire by the time I was 26 and to be loved by as many women as possible. You don't have to get your plans right first time. But that was predicated on the fact that I'd never been loved and I wanted to be loved. And I thought the more people that loved me, the better. And I gave it a good crack for a decade. My wife calls this my Tiger Woods years. It's a bit unfair. It was my years of due diligence. And there's a lot of due diligence going on. It was the 60s. It was sex and drugs and rock and roll. I didn't do drugs, didn't sing, so, you know. But my problem was I hated acrimony. I hated people crying. So I never broke up with any of these girls. You do that for a decade, you've got a serious problem. And that's what happened. What happened was I'd taken to getting around London on my motorbike and crashed into this roundabout that somebody had put in the middle of the night and woke up in hospital. And all those women found me at the same time. They weren't happy. So I left for New Zealand. No, I didn't. I was... That first plan, this is the important thing about this story. You can have plans, you don't have to get them right. But what I had done is know how to build good businesses. I'd started a business which was working with government authorities to do analytical testing for milk companies and breweries and so on. And I'd made a lot of money. And I had been loved by a lot of women, but I didn't know how to love them. And that was the big flaw. And it took me a while to work out that whole process. But at the age of 26, I had £3 million in the bank. And I didn't like myself. So I went on an odyssey to try and find myself, and I just spent the next 2 years travelling overland and literally ran out of land and came to New Zealand. And from the moment that I hit the airport in the arrivals area in New Zealand, I found home, because you don't know it, because one of the problems that we have about all life is that we don't have good powers of observation. An immigrant coming here sees New Zealand the way it is. We get so used to going to the dairy, we just get blancmange, we don't know how we drive to work. And sometimes immigrants see opportunities for businesses that we miss simply because you're so imbued in just the blancmange of your ordinary everyday life. And you haven't got a plan, so you're not even looking for ideas. And so me coming here in 1973 was like, this is the best country in the world for innovation.
We hear that, though. So we hear often that we have this number 8 wire mentality, that we're incredibly ingenious with our limited resources, the far corner of the world. But on a global scale, is that a true story? Our patent success, our global innovation?
Well, the two parts of that story. The first one is, who are we, you know? The next one is, how do we perform, you know? So the first one is, who are we? When I came to New Zealand, I found home, because I found a country like me. And New Zealanders have characteristics that you don't know you've got, you know. And I arrived on an unscheduled flight at 4 a.m. in the morning from Australia, because your air traffic controllers are on strike again. And I arrived at 4 a.m. when nobody should be arriving in the airport. And there was nobody there, really, except for all these young women cleaning off the tables. There were all these sparrows. It's international arrivals is now the domestic terminal, right? And it was painted with, you know, red in those days, which is a red tin shed. And you walked in, you know, basically you literally walked in, you had to come down the steps of the plane, you know, and there's none of those step things that you have now. You know. So you walked down, you walked across, got into this big tin shed. There was nobody there. They had to wake up some guy who came out the back to do all the passport stuff. But what was there were these guys and these girls. And there were all these sparrows flying around, and they were pooping on the tables. Now, this was a problem, because in the morning rush, they needed to clean those tables. So there was these women with pinafores on cleaning the tables. And to mitigate the problem also were 4 guys with swan dries with air rifles shooting the birds. I thought, brilliant, this is the country for me, you know. I've been to Beirut, never seen any shit like this. This is really cool, you know. And that's what it was like, you know, because, you know, you guys are not fond of rules. You know, you don't care a shit, you know. And so I got to the curb, and it got better, because the guy I met on the plane was coming back from Europe with his, you know, with his suitcases, and he's meeting his wife at the airport. And that was my first nomenclature problem, because in England, your mum is your mother. And he said, Mum's meeting us at the airport, and she'll give us a lift home and show us round. So when he got to the curb and started passing, this woman looked old enough to be his sister. I thought, hello, there's a bit of dueling banjos going in New Zealand land, you know, they're not completely right. But he got better, because in the back of this Mini was his mother and father-in-law. He didn't know they were coming up from Christchurch, and they'd filled up the boot, And I had all this camping paraphernalia. It was him and his wife and his sister, whoever she was. And I knew it was technically not possible to go anywhere in this vehicle. Because at that stage in my career, I've been educated at some of the best colleges in London. I knew about volume, physics, maths. No way we're going anywhere in this vehicle. Technically not doable. Anyway, we're driving on the southern motorway. And the old boy's got one suitcase like that, another one on the roof. And the young guy's got all the camping paraphernalia wrapped around his arm, driving and I'm in the back like a Maltese of the girls, you know. Who are these people? You know, they're not right. And that's when I knew within an hour of arrival in New Zealand, impossible is just a starting point for Kiwis. And hand on heart, none of the things that I've done on the world stage I would have ever done in the UK. It's only because I came to New Zealand and became a New Zealander. And this osmosis to become a New Zealander is just like that. It is osmosis. People talk about number 8 when, you know, to answer the first part of the question. People think that we have this number 8 fencing wild mentality. We did a book about 2 years ago where we travelled around New Zealand and interviewed a whole bunch of people, scientists, artists and so on, and tried to find out who we were as a society. What makes us different? Is it the tyranny of distance that makes us invent things and be innovative, or is it something else? It turned out to be, in Cameron Bennett's words, a treasure. And it's how we operate as a country and how we operate as a people. And we came up with 3 kind of values that we have that are quite different than any other country in the world. But before I tell you the first one, I want you to tell you the story of how I became a New Zealander from a practical perspective. So I arrived in New Zealand and house prices were doubling overnight, nothing new. Particularly in Auckland. So I bought a few properties in Auckland. I just went around with it in the cab and bought these properties. And one of them had a lava flow going through the basement. So being bored and unknowledgeable about scoria rock, I decided to dig it out. And I got this Kango hammer and drilled it into the mountain. It got stuck. It goes in past the house that separates the tool from the machine. Now you can't get it out. You know, it's buggered. So I had to get a bigger one to drill that one out. And that went on and on and on. Until finally I got one of those green things, those big green, you know, and that saved the day. Not that I used it, because a guy called Jack came over from across the road, and he was my neighbour for 10 years before he died. And he had a cigarette in the corner of his mouth that I never saw him take out, ever. And he came over and he said, "What are you trying to do?" "I'm trying to dig a basement out." He said, "You won't do it like that, mate." So I know now. He said, "Come and look at my place." So we went across to his place, and it was a perfectly symmetrical garage, just like a square of butter removed from the whole mountain. And I said, "That's brilliant. No score marks, no drill marks." I said, "How do you do that?" "Dynamite." I said, "Isn't that dangerous?" He said, No. Mum was upstairs doing washing up. That's his wife. All the floorboards popped up, the nails popped up. She complained about slippers getting scuffed, banged them down, all sweet. "I'll do your place." And he did. And that's what makes New Zealanders completely fucking mad. And he'd come over every weekend and he'd say, "You know, you've got a great view of Mount Eden. You get rid of that macrocarpa." I said, "I haven't got a chainsaw." I said, "I have." Because before he used to work in the Thames gold mine as a chief dynamiter, deaf as a post. And before that, he worked in forestry, of course he did. And he had a chainsaw bigger than him. It took him an hour to get it started. It erupted in a big plume of smoke. And then he started to boil this tree. And that's a very accurate adjective, because I don't think he had a chain on it. I'm not sure what was going on. But there wasn't even friction going on. Steam was coming out of this tree. And it was just succumbing to something, you know. And he had me hold the top of this tree with a rope, and he said, "When I say pull, boy, you pull." And then there was this twisting, cracking sound. He goes, "Run!" When I woke up, all I could see was this cigarette pulsing and this big plume of blue smoke. It was pulsing in turn to his heart, because I think he thought he'd killed me. And then those wonderful immortal words that only a Kiwi would say to you under these circumstances, when he looked down and said, "Don't worry, mate, I'll cut you out." And that's what makes us different. The first rule of being a Kiwi is we're not fond of rules. If you doubt that for a moment, who's got a deck they haven't got a permit? About a metre, that'll be fine. We just don't give a shit, really, you know. And that's what makes us different, is that ambition to just give things a crack. You know, the rules don't matter that much, you know. And that's a cultural embedded thing. You don't know who you are, but we think like that. It isn't that we just make fences. It's that we dream that we can make fences, okay? So that's the first rule of being a Kiwi. And I started to see that, you know. So a year later, when I had been in New Zealand for a year, somebody came to me and said, could you help set up the Department of Clinical Pharmacology at the Auckland Medical School? I would have said if I was in the UK, I can't possibly do that. I'm a forensic analytical scientist. I know nothing about gross anatomy and medicine. I couldn't set up a department like that. But I've been in New Zealand for a year, exposed to Jack and all those people. So, of course, I said, okay. And that's what we do. And that's how we started working at the medical school and then subsequently Douglas Pharmaceuticals. So the second part of the question is, so that's why we have that cultural, you know, perspective, that we do just give things a go. But the second part is that we actually dare to dream. We actually dare to dream as a country. You know, one of the few countries in the world that you can dare to dream to be anything that you want to be. Very few countries in the world that you can do that. And I know that coming from a country that was very embedded in the 18th century. There's more rules about hot water cylinders in the UK than you can imagine. But in New Zealand, we're pretty much unembedded in terms of what you can do. So we see entrepreneurs in New Zealand making global changes. The big problem that we have, I think, in New Zealand is that we don't know who we are and we don't understand the power of who we are. And if we can and harness that, then I think we can take our place on the world stage. So in terms of innovation, if you look at the innovation index for Switzerland, which is the leader in innovation, they're number one. So you can do a whole lot of analytical, you know, stuff around that. You can say, well, is it because they've got more people that they're number one, you know? So their population density is about 350 people a square kilometre, compared with New Zealand, which is only about 17. So if you've got a pile of people together, surely that means you get more innovation happening. But it's not actually that, because what we know is that innovation occurs at the edge of societies, in diffuse societies, not concentrated societies. Okay, so the algorithm doesn't hold up. And in fact, when you actually drill down in it, the reason that they're number one is because they've got 2,875 patents for one Swiss watch movement. And that's how we measure, you know, innovation quantums, getting how many patents you got, how many products you get to market. But when you think about global impact, we would blow everybody out of the water. You don't know it, but we influence billions and billions of people around the world. And what I'm interested in, why I do these Spark gigs, is because I know that we do. And I think it should be in part of our education system that encourages kids to understand how powerful we are on the world stage. And if we can get that message across, then we can change things.
Let's pick that point up, Sir Ray, because you talked earlier about the education system, and for the parents in the room now, the younger generation growing up now has different challenges, not more challenges, but different challenges. We know that the rate of change is faster than it's ever been. We've got a growing middle class. That Kiwi mentality that former generations grow up with, a laid-back, relaxed, she'll-be-right attitude, is increasingly changing for you must hit these grades, you must find a way to excel. So given that, what would your advice be to parents in the room? How do you instill that classic Kiwi attribute to be able to innovate and think different?
Well, it's a very important question because I've got two young daughters, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, late starter, a lot of due diligence. But I watch my kids go to school, and one of the things is, you know, as an observer of how things work, I would watch my youngest daughter go to school, and she was going to preschool, and she'd play, and she'd pull everything apart and play with things. And then when she went to proper school, I remember taking her out of the classroom, and she panicked because I was taking her across the level crossing to get to the car, and she didn't have a cap on. And she was terrified because she didn't have a cap on. Because we process the kids, and we put them into a uniform so that they do feel that, you know, they're under control. So there's no excitement or kind of innovation education So all I can do as a parent, and I encourage you to do this with all of your kids, is to create an extramural innovation activity. So with my kids, for instance, I don't want them to be scientists. One of them might be a vet. I've got one daughter who's like me. She's just, because when you get a kid, it's like, they come pre-programmed. They come absolutely pre-programmed, pretty much. So one of my daughters is going to be a rocket scientist or something, or certainly a PhD in something. The other one's probably going to be a pole dancer. But we love them both, and what we do is try and give them the tools to be successful at whatever they want to do. But what I want to do with them is to give them the opportunity of understanding how innovation occurs. Okay? And so for all of you, 101 observation is this. Observation is the key to innovation. Okay? Every single bit of technology that you can think of comes from one person seeing something that's there for everybody to see, but they act on it. You've got fundamental research or, research that's done by a whole lot of people that knows how to put chips together and how you laminate things and do certain chemical reactions. But the guy that works out how to use that technology and apply it for a customer-centric statement of need is the one that makes a successful product. So it's identifying how you can use that technology. So what I do with my kids is just show them stuff. And the good thing about the kids is that they're not frightened of failure either. They don't see failure as failure. So a good example would be, I wanted to teach my kids about how a rocket worked. And so I bought a $29.95 little rocket that you can buy at the mine lab or something. And you fill it up with sodium bicarbonate and a bit of vinegar, shake it up, the CO2 is produced and it goes. Only this one went premature ejaculation. That was just rubbish. So I thought, I'll make you a rocket. So I went out, got a 44-gallon drum, 25 kg of citric acid, got the Ray Avery drill in there, and I aerodated a little rocket on the top. The same rocket, aerodated that on. And I knew that with 5-minute aerodate, it was going to take a considerable pressure for this sucker to go off. So I knew that I was I just wanted to go across the fence, to be honest, And I wrote the name of the man on the moon on it, the girls were up against the house. They had the swimming goggles on, ready to rock and roll. And I turned the sucker on, and the fucking thing exploded. The house was covered in foam. The kids were covered in foam. Mum came out. The bang was enormous. I didn't know what to do. And then the wife said, "Are you guys okay?" And that spurred me in to look at the girls and say, "Are you guys okay?" And the girls said, "That was brilliant, Dad, do it again." Because they didn't see that as failure. That was just another experiment about life. And that's what we need to teach our kids, is about that, having fun, about enjoying science and life. And, it isn't about the goal of that. That metric now is success or failure. So some of those kids will feel they failed by the time they're 15 or 16 because they haven't met that strange metrics that some people in the dark room have come up with. That's not what the world is about. So I try and mitigate all of that education stuff by giving my kids the power of observation. And the power of observation is just there. All of you are capable of inventing real cool stuff. And to give you a very simple example of how simple that is, a guy in the Swiss Alps was walking his dog. A dog came back to him covered in cockleburs, these little seeds that they hook onto the fur. And they're all over his trouser cuffs as well. So he got home, got his kid's microscope, looked under the microscope, saw these little hooks, there were all these little barbs like that, almost like a pollen grain. And he went home and he just patented the patent for Velcro. That's it. And everything that you can think of, whether it's somebody looking down a microscope and seeing that these bacteria don't grow against this mould called penicillin, it's about that. And you're all capable of doing that. 4 guys was trotted out their mind in France. They'd been on the pub crawl, and they had 3 problems. They had no money, no local currency, because they spent it all on grog. Their credit cards were maxed out. They didn't know where they were, and they didn't know the name of the local cab company to get them home to their hotel. So they invented Uber. Another group of guys sitting around in their house, and they didn't have a flatmate in their spare room, and they invented Airbnb. All of those things are accessible to you. It's just seeing stuff, just watching finding a customer statement of need is the key to every successful. Don't try and find a product and try and sell a product to somebody, but find a customer statement of need, and that's what I do. You know.
So, to me, the fascinating thing about that is the way you describe it. It is so obvious. It's not highfalutin. It's not buried in a textbook. Yet most world-class best practice innovation processes has 12 gates, 7 templates, 7 people to sign it off. Where do we go wrong from something that is as so simple as that, as someone that is 3 piss guys coming up with the idea for Uber versus world-class innovation, but that's slowing it down?
Well, firstly, I'd argue, as New Zealanders, we haven't got it wrong. I think New Zealand is the most innovative country on the planet. It's just that you don't know it. As I said earlier, billions of people are using Kiwi technology. And it comes out of the 3 characteristics. The first characteristic is we're not fond of rules. We'd all agree on that, wouldn't we? We don't want to talk to the council about the deck. Doesn't matter. It only matters when we come to sell it. So we just make it up. Just make it all up. And in fact, anybody heard of Rocket Lab? Rocket Lab? Okay. Put your hand up if you heard of Rocket Lab. Okay, brilliant. Rocket Lab, when they first did it, didn't have a permit. Just went down to the got some money from Michael Fay. You can't do that in any other country in the world. You try and do that in America, the FBI will be around your place with tracker dogs. You're going to be locked up. You try and do that in Australia, the air traffic controllers will want to know where the rocket's going to land. No fucking idea where it landed. Because that wasn't the point. He was just testing the propulsion system. He says that's practical, we're Kiwis, just rock it up, Now he's got a permit after the third attempt. We've got a permit now, brilliant. And also a few $100 million investment in the business. But that comes back to the next 2 couple of rules, and they are, we've got no respect for the status quo. There's no way on God's earth that a guy who would just tie rockets onto his bicycle to get to school faster should be able to set up a multi-million-dollar space industry in New Zealand. We've got more rocket scientists per head of population than any other country in the world right now. Just because the last characteristic came into being, that is, he dared to dream. And so when you go around, let's just do a kind of experiment. So who's heard of Bill Buckley? Bill Buckley? Okay, so probably less than 10%. All of you have been touched by Bill Buckley. Bill Buckley makes 90% of the world's electromagnets that fire up the chips that make your photon displays work in anything that's a flat screen TV or your mobile phone. It's not a company in Silicon Valley. It's a guy in South Auckland who wears an Einstein tie and drives an Aston Martin. Well, he doesn't actually. His wife drives it because he's got too many speeding tickets. That goes back to number 1, not fond of rules. As he's told, listen, I can drive this at 280 miles an hour. It's perfectly safe. Anyway, but that's who we are as Kiwis. So good old Bill dared to dream. Somebody came to him from the University of Auckland and said, look, there's these machines the size of that projector there that take hours to process chips. I want to build a machine the size of this room that can process millions of chips. And what did Bill do? Say, okay. Because that's what we do. We just give things a crack. So Bill started Buckley Engineering, and now what he's worked out is that he can use the same photon displays for treating cancer patients in a much more safer way than by radiotherapy. He's not a physicist, but he just dared to dream and give things a go, because that's the way we do things in New Zealand. But to give you an idea of how practical and how simple it can be to just change the world, anybody heard of Colin Murdoch? Nobody, right? Brilliant. We should be teaching our kids about Colin Murdoch at school, because he was a pharmacist from Timaru that changed the world for everybody. Everybody in this room has been touched by Colin. Because all he did was, his wife was dictating this note for the shopping list at the local countdown, and this was in 1953. And his pen ran out of ink. And it was a big pen, so you could see inside it was just a clear thing. And so he could see a little bit of ink at the end. He thought, if I could force that out, I could just finish this note, because in those days you had to go right up to the dairy and blah, blah. So he sharpened some matchsticks, poked them down, and when he was doing that, at that one moment of observation, I thought, if I could put a piston inside this piece of plastic, I could invent the world's first plastic disposable hypodermic syringe, which would change global healthcare forever. Because in 1953, we were all using glass syringes. In fact, I was in an orphanage in the UK, lined up the whole school in alphabetical order, and we had this woman in surgical stockings who was very big, well, she seemed very big to me, and she had a bucket of BCG vaccine, and she had the same 50cc syringe, and the same needle was on the end, because we didn't know about age in those days, and she just went down the whole line. I was bloody glad my name was Avery, you know. Now, this thing stays with you. I've got 2 daughters, Amelia and Anastasia. But that's what happens. This one guy changed the world. All he did was actually change the materials of construction that made it much more customer-centric. Because before that, we had to get those glass syringes, disassemble them, clean them with detergent, clean them with still water, sterilise them and put them back into packages. And now we had a way of being much more customer-centric. All he did was find a more customer-centric way of doing the same thing. And that's what good innovation is about. But also it's good for us, because it meant that we stopped AIDS pandemics and we stopped all of these other things. So literally, if you think about Weta Workshops, there's not one animation movie that you see in the world that's not embedded in Weta Workshops. Think about what Peter Jackson did in making these 3 blockbuster movies. Whether it's we've got cows walking around the paddock right now with lights on their bum that tell them when they're in estrus. That's what Kiwis do. There's a whole lot of shit going on in New Zealand that really is game-changing. And so, for me, I see that, and I think what we should be doing is educating our kids and saying, that's what we do. We actually change the world. It can be something simple like bungee jumping, but bungee jumping's fun, and we invented it. Jet boats, we invented that, And so you don't have to have the PhD in physics or whatever. It's about I've never invented anything in my life. All I've done is taken existing technologies and put them into packages that meet a customer statement of need. And in doing so, we've changed the lives of millions of people around the globe. But none of that would have happened without that Kiwi not fond of rules. I'm just going to tell this one story because it is about the power of us. I want you to understand about how you build teams of people. You need to build teams of people. Nobody can do everything on their own. Think of every company in the world you can think of. There's a lot of them that just have bifurcated names, Bosch and Lomb, Smith and Nephew, blah, 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 whatever. And it's because you need teams of people. And the problem with the education system, it separates us and it makes us competitive rather than working as a group of people together. And if you can work together and make teams, if you get the larger the company, the more often you get fractionated. You get production, quality assurance, they hate each other, they're natural enemies. Then you get accounts, pretty much everybody hates accounts, And so you get all this fractionation, but what if you could actually get them all to believe in the same goal? And then you build successful companies, and that's what I do. But it's also predicated on that, when I abstract back to what I was trying to achieve with all those young ladies in England, I actually was trying to build a family. I didn't have a family. So I wanted to build a family. And so I understood that if you wanted to build great companies, you treat everybody in your company like being part of the family. You spend more working hours with everybody that you work with than any other people. And if you change that dynamic and treat them like family, you have an unassailable force that can change things. And that's what you need to do. So we do that. A good example of how that might happen was we were in Eritrea at the end of the 30-year War of Independence, and I had a whole bunch of Kiwis guys there helping me to build this factory to make intraocular lenses for cataract surgery. And the MiGs came over and bombed our warehouse. The war started again, and they bombed the warehouse, and all the ducting that we needed to build this factory was munted. Stainless steel ducting, very high-tech, all gone. And I was upstairs looking down at my boys who were having a barbecue. They'd got a 44-gallon drum and cut it in half, started a barbecue, and all the Eritreans were saying, "Why are they burning the meat?" I said, "Well, it's just what we do in New Zealand, don't worry about it." But they were having a barbecue, and they were looking at Dad, because what I do with companies is I start my companies like this. I say, okay, you guys are now part of our company. I'm Dad, and your job is to look after me. My job is to look after all of you, okay? And if you and you think you're going to show off and show me how individually you are cleverer than you'll get smacked. Because what will happen is all the other people will put their hands in the air and start whistling like Superman because you think you're Superman and you think you're Superman. You're not, but we are. Together, nobody can assail us. We can be the best of the best. And so the way that manifests is in this situation in Eritrea, there was no aluminium in the country to make this ducting, so I was going to have to send these guys back home over the Sudan. It was going to take 6 months. So I do what I normally do when things get really, really rough like that. I drink half a bottle of whiskey. I find it just takes the edge off. I don't recommend it to everybody, but some people call it sleeping on it. But I just drink whiskey. But when I was thinking about what I was going to do with these guys, they took off in the middle of the night. They knew that Dad was upset, and they didn't know what. They went off. And in the morning when I got up, the whole yard was covered in big sheets of aluminium, huge sheets of aluminium. And I knew there was no aluminium in the whole country, but they'd been out all night with their pop-big guns and their drawers getting aluminium. And when I walked across the forecourt to see where they'd been getting this aluminium, I could see that they were grinding off the motorway, because the bastards had been out all night knocking off the whole motorway sign for the whole country. It was in Time magazine, because they thought it was something to do with the actual invasion. It wasn't. It was a bunch of Kiwis who didn't give a shit. They knew that Dad was upset, we needed to fix it, and they were folding this stuff up. And if you go into that factory today, there's this huge stainless steel ductwork with this Class 10,000 clean room, FDA-approved factory, but there's this little tiny plaque made of aluminium, which is pop-riveted on with all the names of all of those guys that actually did that. And that's why I love New Zealand, because we do that. We actually don't have we're not fond of rules. If we've got a problem, we fix it and we look after each other. And that's our magic. But we need to be somehow to make that a collegiate thing, so everybody and our kids believe that. Because if we did, because look at the world at large and look at what's going on in America and so on. We don't, and Australians are very much better at that self-belief stuff. They back themselves much better. But we need to actually say it's not wrong to be good at stuff and to have good mates, and let's find ways that we can work together to build global companies that can actually do things. But it starts with that education system. So uneducating kids in terms of what's valuable about life is actually team building, looking after each other. It's not about secular, each of us trying to get to this goal, which we say is NZCS or whatever it is. It's actually about working together to come up with ideas that make the world better for us and our planet. And so that's what we do. And everybody in our organisation actually believes that. They get up in the morning and try and change the world and make it better than they found it. And all of you are capable of doing that.
So to that end, Sir Ray, because given the schooling curriculum is what it is, that's not to say that's where it's going to stay, but it is going to take a while to change. What would your advice be to the people in the room as to how do they go about making the attitude you talk about contagious? How do you start the movement of that tomorrow?
Well, you have to talk about it. That's the first thing, and that's why I do these talks, and have a sense of Kiwi pride. When I travel internationally, and I did a TED talk a few years ago, and I was in Texas, and this after the TED talk, this big Texan billionaire came up to me and he said, "I loved your talk, boy." I said, "That's nice." He said, "You got a card?" I said, "Yep." I gave him a card, and on the back of the card it's just got "Change the World," because everybody in our organisation believes that they can change the world. We have changed the world for millions of people, and we will change the world for millions of other people. But everybody believes that. So when I showed him the card, he went, "That's a goddamn arrogant statement, boy." And I said, "Fuck off." Because that's who we are. Because we actually believe it. And we don't want to be deterred by somebody, the naysayers. So it's about building that belief, a bit like my daughters, when they see that explosion, they don't see that as a bad thing. Failure for successful people is just a cul-de-sac on the way to success. Failure is a learning process. It's inevitable. But we tend to think, particularly in business, that it's a terminal status. It isn't. If you learn from your mistakes and you move on. In fact, in science, it's just the normal predication of having a thesis, and you have a thesis and you find that thesis doesn't work, so you modulate the thesis and you go on and find something that works. And failure is also logical, because failure is being frightened of something that may happen. Hasn't happened. So if a bear is running towards you in the woods and you're frightened, you can shit yourself and stand there and you're going to get eaten. You can run and you're going to get eaten. But if you think about it and think, what are the best chances statistically? And I've been told that the best thing is not to hit them in the nuts. That's what somebody told me. But if you hit them in the nose, that actually works. So that's what I would do. I'd run and hit them in the nose, because that's my best, I'm not frightened because there's no point in being frightened. If you're frightened, it's all over. So don't worry, because most people don't start businesses because they're frightened they might fail. If you start it, give it a go, kick the ball out there. But you can't do it on your own. So the first thing I'd say to you is, and this goes right back to why it's nice, if I could give you one bit of advice about starting businesses and how you go about that, it would be, don't develop products and try and sell them to people, because you'll probably go bankrupt. Find a customer statement of need and a customer solution, and you'll be okay. So focus on customer statement of need, because I remember giving a talk in Sydney a few months ago, and there were all these software writers, and they were writing apps they were really products that people might want, for turning their cat on and off at night or whatever. I don't know what they were doing. But they didn't have any customers, actually. You can sometimes get lost. Kodak went bankrupt, a few years ago. $63 billion company went bankrupt because it kept trying to sell the same products to the people when people had moved on. But they did what the normal people do. Their customer base was decreasing because the sales of their emulsion-based technology were being overwhelmed by digital film and by digital photocopiers. But they kept on trying to sell the same product, and they invested more money in mail marketing and eventually went bankrupt. So don't try and sell products to people. Find a customer-centric solution. If there's enough people with the same problem, and you can meet the customer statement of need in terms of satisfying the statement of need and the right price, and work with your customers. And usually when I'm working with customers, what I do is I try and do all the marketing documentation for the customer before I finish designing the product. Because if I don't know I'm going to sell it, I don't know what the product is. And often people come to me with an idea for a product, and they really don't have a customer.
A couple of the questions that come through now are on themes like collaboration, which I guess if we could presume working for you, it's a very collaborative environment. But if you're working in an organisation where it's not collaborative by nature, either within it or amongst its competitive set, in your experience, how do you go about setting up that culture? How do you encourage and foster that idea of working more closely with others?
Well, I think it's very difficult in embedded. There are some companies that are very embedded, and you're probably all aware of things what happened in the early 80s and 70s and 80s in terms of unions. Of course, you had these people who were trying to get their views across in terms of working with their employers and so on. I think it's one of the biggest problems we have right across every industry, really, is embedded organisations that are very slow to change. And often it's a top-down thing. The people that have got to the top are often the ones who are not innovative. They're the old-school people, so they don't enjoy young people snipping at them below and saying, this is how we're going to change, or this is what we'd like to do. But it's possible. Spark is a classic case of that, where Spark made this huge transformation from basically a copper wire telecom company to a digital company, and who knows, they may be involved in distribution of movies or whatever. They're becoming much more customer centric. In fact, they have whole divisions now really looking at how they can communicate better with their customers. So they're very focused on customers. They don't try and sell product anymore. They actually sell customer centric solutions. So it can be done even in large organisations, but it takes individuals with vision and the right place in that company. So if you're in the bottom of a company that's embedded, it's very hard to get changes. The other thing that's worth thinking about in the world tomorrow is in terms of people who think about 2050. Everybody talks about what's going to happen in 2050, and we're going to all be driving around in driverless cars and all this stuff's going to happen. Probably won't. No, it won't, because we're human. The thing that stops, we all work in, there are two business entities that are at play here. One of them is unembedded businesses, and that's pretty much by things like mobile phone technology, because I can make an app on a mobile phone and get it out to the market just like that. I can actually get a mobile phone app that's got a circle, and I put my nose in the middle of it. It can measure my heart rate just by the pixelation, colour change in my nose, and that's all doable. I can make a flat screen TV. I can make OLED TVs, so I can make a whole range of things. They're embedded, and everybody can do that. But when it's involved in medicine, transportation, and building, construction, it's all embedded systems, and it takes a long time for innovation to get through that whole process. You may think that we're, what do you think about mobile phones? Do you think mobile phones have been a real dynamic change? Anybody think that mobile phones have been a real dynamic change? Like huge change, very dynamic, very quick? Yeah, no, rubbish. Rubbish. They were invented in 1973, 47 years ago. First mobile phone, 1973. In 1984, AT&T got the good old guys at McKinsey to do a business case about whether mobile phones would be worth investing in. And McKinsey told them it's rubbish because they're so bulky and their range is so small that you never take over. But it's actually taken almost nearly 50 years before we reach where we are. And I know that. So when I invest in businesses, I look at that future-proofing of business, because it isn't like that we're going to suddenly have something. Uber and other companies are unembedded systems. Well, partially unembedded because now they're getting, of course, all this litigation by competitors, blah, blah, blah. But if you can find that ecological niche for your business where you can actually do something, but most things like transportation, education is a classic case. How do we change the whole education system? We know it's wrong, but you try and get the education system to be changed. We know it's wrong. We're educating kids predicated on a system that was devised in the Industrial Revolution for educating them for a future that we don't know what it's going to be. We want the greatest imaginations of all mankind now to find a way of how we're going to function in 2050. So we don't want kids who know how to write and read. We want kids with imagination. Einstein said, if you want to build an intelligent child, read it fairy stories. It's about imagination. So we've got to start that whole process. And that's what we do with our family and our organisations. All have a voice. Everybody has a voice. And one way that we never lose that voice is to do one important thing. You need in all of your business to understand every customer in your business. But the problem is that we often think about customers being external to the business. If you actually do it, the proper algorithm is this. The most important customer in your business is the person you go to bed with every night. Because you don't get that right, you can't function, So you get that right. And then you get the internal people in your business right. You treat them like family. And what we do to mitigate that is, and I do this with my wife every night before I go to sleep, not what you're thinking. What we do is we turn to each other and we do this with all our employees. Every time they leave to go home, they have to say this to the person who's their immediate supervisor or the person below them. They all have to talk up to this. They simply give them 3 adjectives to describe how they performed as a human being that day. And that way you don't lose anybody. So you just do 3 adjectives. And it's fun, my wife and I do it every night, When baby was up the other night barfing over somebody and she came back to bed, she was smelling of sick. And she finally had a shower and she came to bed. And I said, 3 words for Mr. Ray. And she said, oh, shit, it's my morning. And she didn't have any more words to say. And I said, well, and she couldn't help herself. She said, 3 words for Miss Anna. And I said, and I was just teasing her. I said, voluptuous, sexy, and ravishing. And she said, fuck off, you're not getting any. But that's what it's about. It's about building a culture of family where you can say anything or do anything to your immediate supervisor and they know that they care about you and they will look after you and take you through this whole process. And that gets away from that hierarchical stuff that separates businesses and fractionates them. And if you understand all the external customers as well, and you start to do some data mining around, and that's what Spark's doing. A part of this whole exercise for Spark is to understand their customers, the customer statement of need. What do you need from Spark in terms of the tools that you need to get better at your business? And that's why I'm passionate about doing this, because for me, coming to New Zealand was like finding home, because I found a whole bunch of people like me that weren't fond of rules, had no respect for the status quo, and just wanted to change stuff and make the world better than we found it. And so that's why I'm ferociously proud to be a Kiwi, because I know that together we can change the world from this little island state. We can reach out. We've already done it. Everybody in the world has been touched by Colin Murdoch just because he had an idea and he saw one simple thing.
I'm just going to do a time check. How are we for people in the audience? 5 or so minutes longer to keep going? There are a number of questions starting to come through, and I want to, as I said from the outset, the great thing about Spark Lab is you get the opportunity to ask whatever question you like. We might just need to shorten some of the answers if there are a number of questions going on. One of them, Sir Ray, is about, and I think it's predicated with the power of observation. In your opinion, how important is diversity, cultural diversity in this instance, within an organisation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that happens, I think, in the world stage is that we tend to make stuff for us, whoever that us is. So, we tend to make products. I mean, a good example, we're making a low-cost infant incubator that's going out to the world. It will be ultimately as ubiquitous as an iPhone. It'll be in every hospital in the world. And I promise you, hand on heart, that's going to happen. Okay. But the incubators that we make for us in the first world, they break down in the developing world because they're not designed to work in the developing world. They put dirty water in them, not that are still distilled water. The power goes off all the time. So we tend to make products for us, and they don't work for other people in the developing world. In fact, most of us get up in the morning, I think it's fair to say, and we don't think about that little girl in Syria who's got no water. We just go about doing all the things that we do. So I think we need to start thinking about us as a species and looking after each other. And so the businesses that we get involved in should be, from my perspective, good for us as an individual and as a collegiate group of people, and good for the planet. We should be starting to think about what it all means, because if you don't, it's a bit mad in a way, because we wouldn't have I've never seen a suicide bomber with a Gucci bag or a golf bag. And it's that disequity that we've created that causes a lot of the world's fractionation. And it causes the same fractionation in businesses on a more micro scale. So I think we need to start getting better as human beings and looking after each other. And so that's the key, I think, in terms of diversity, is to start thinking. And what happens with diversity, I saw an article the other day of a guy who came to New Zealand from China, and he struggled. English was his second language, and he was struggling. But he's now got a company worth a few $1 million where he imports and exports stuff to China because he could see the opportunity. Because unlike the Muppets at Frontera, he recognised that the customers in China wanted products made in New Zealand, not made in Sanlu in China. They trusted New Zealand product. And Comvita and other companies like that have, worked on that brand stuff, that we are trustworthy. We have a brand, and I don't think we should be trying to sell clean green New Zealand, because that's a fallacy. All the cows popping in the streams. But what we can do is actually use what we do in our intelligentsia on the world stage to actually make a difference.
For someone that is a very intuitive person, and you've commented you do a lot by design, or by observation rather, when you evaluate a new innovation, if someone comes to you and says, Sir, I've got this idea, how much of that is gut versus proper due diligence?
Oh, it's due diligence. I don't have any gut feelings, about things. I'm very rational because I don't know that I'm that clever. The reality is, what I do is I just look at it from a customer's perspective and say, does this thing have legs? And one of my measuring sticks is it'll need an extension. And this comes out of a true story. And this was a guy who came to me and he said, I've got a product. It's really cool. I think he was about 18 years old, and he said, it's the strongest vacuum cleaner in the world. You can suck up a 14-litre can of Coke or whatever. It's just huge. And it was huge. You could, you put it on your back, it looked like a jetpack, And I said, well, who's the customer? He said, well, Eden Park, because, after Eden Park, after the rugby games, you can go up the aisles and suck up all the crap and everything. You don't need to worry about getting blocked, And I said, well, it won't fit up the aisles in Eden Park. He said, I'll get an extension. And it's like a failed, there isn't a customer. There's no customer. And they keep adding the extensions to justify, and it happens all the time. People usually, the mad people that come to me with ideas are the ones who've got a product and they're absolutely convinced this product will change the world. In another conversation, quite different this, I'll tell you the one about the toilet paper. This is really brilliant, but I'm not going to do it now.
To the audience, any final questions?
You spoke about your education sort of stemming from reading Encyclopedia Britannica. Like the kids of today, sort of the question sort of stems around the sort of the future, is they're sort of totally imbued with the internet and fully immersed in that, and the information streams that are coming to them, like I would call them uncontrolled. So how do you see their intelligence developing to the point where they can deal with problems that we don't believe in?
So that was a question that picks up on the fact that the youth of today get far greater access to information than Sir Ray's, which was relying on Encyclopedia Britannica. To what degree are we better equipping or worse equipping kids?
And it's a very good question, 10 out of 10, because because nobody's measuring you. Because I always go back to that wonderful quote, and I'm hopeless at dates, but so there was somebody, and it might have been the early 1940s, and he was working for the patent office, and he said, we should really close the patent office because everything that's been invented has been invented. And of course, he didn't have any vision about what the world could be like. And the good thing about, I'm a polymath, and that means that I know a lot of shit about a lot of things. And that was a good starter for me because I could do things on my own. I could start successful businesses on my own because I knew a lot of the bits that and it took me a while to work out that if I could do much more by building teams of people with lots more information. But the reality is today, if somebody comes to me with an idea for a particular technology, within about 17 minutes I can be a world expert on it by just going on to Wikipedia or Google and looking at stuff. So I think the reality is that the information trail is much more accessible to everybody now. It's much more accessible than it ever has been. So it's actually a better landscape for innovators than it ever has been because you can find out, you can, the best way to have a great idea is have lots of ideas. And I take Churchill's kind of discipline, which is always approach every idea or every challenge with the same enthusiasm that you failed with before, and you failed with before, and you failed with before, and you failed with before. So, always, I go to my wife and I go, it's a really good idea, and she goes, oh. And eventually I titrate it myself, and my idea doesn't stand scrutiny by going onto the internet and checking. Usually what happens with me is I find I've invented something and I think I'm very clever, and I do the duck, do the shower dance, and I'm great. And then I go on the internet and find somebody's invented it, and so then I have to go around it. In the act of going around it, I invent something that's really cool. So it's so that the answer to the question is that knowledge is available to everybody. Peter Beck said when he was talking about his rocket concept that he can launch rockets every month, from his launch pad, that space is open for business. Well, innovation is open for business because we all have access to far more information than we've ever had. And also because we're connecting better. One of the things that happens on the global stage, which is the importance of these meetings, is about 30 million years ago, there was a guy in a cave and he was making an arrowhead, and he was using that one rock with the same hardness as another to chip away. So it's a very random process that he could get the right arrowhead without breaking the tool that he was actually. And the reason that the arrowhead is the size that it is because it's the palm of your hand, because that's being customer centric. And the mouse that you use on your computer is the size of your hand. But the difference in those two technologies is it took that one guy probably 4 months to make one arrowhead, and he never shared that technology with anybody in the other cave, and it took a long time for all that technology to get diffused through the whole world. But in today's world, that one mouse there were probably about 23,000 people involved in that mouse, from the polymer chemists to the people. And the shelf life of that technology is less than a year. It'll be usurped by the next bit of technology, and that's because we communicate information much more rapidly. So we're in a very good shape to do that. That being said, you need to be aware that if you know that the laws of adoption of innovation are, the first 10% are very rapid, and then there's this long lag before everybody adopts it. And it's not by advertising and marketing, it's just by word of mouth. And that's why you're not going to be driving around in a driverless car in 2015, because the number of questions that you have as a customer about that are going to be quite complicated. Like when you have an accident, who pays for it? And where do they drive on the road? And who pays for this and who pays for that? And you need the laws of robotics. So if you're going to go into these school kids, how does the computer know whether it's going to make a decision whether you're going to kill the school kids or you're going to kill the traffic warden? So there's a lot of shit that needs to be sorted out with all this stuff, that if you do what I do, which is failure mode cause risk analysis, which is what can go wrong, you think about what can go wrong with your business and you mitigate all the risks.
To the room. We're fairly close on time now. On that, then, we will we'll draw this evening to a close. It's rare to get the opportunity to listen to you, Sir Ray, and every time I do, it blows me away that it can take someone that adopts this place as home for us to recognise how precious it is. And your stories, your analogies, your tales, your successes, your passion, I'm sure is motivating for everyone in the room. So if you could join with me with a sincere thank you. And as a small token of appreciation from Spark for this evening, there's a lovely bottle of something that we hope you'll enjoy.
Okay.
It's not whiskey, there's no stress tonight. And in the spirit of appreciation and in that sense unapologetic thanks to every Spark customer in the room, a special thank you to you. And the reason we say that is the only reason that the rest of us have managed to enjoy Sir Ray tonight is that one Spark customer asked for it and another said it would be a good idea. And consequentially, we've now done 163 of these events through New Zealand. So thank you for all of the Spark customers in the room. They say there's no such thing as a free lunch, or in this case, a free evening. And there is one small area of exchange that we ask for. And it's implicit in a lot of what Sir Ray's talked about this evening. And that for us this time is feedback. Because by understanding what you thought of tonight, by understanding, and this isn't one of those sort of ones where you go, oh, thanks, that'd be great, and then leave and then not do it, because we sit down with Sir Ray, we share the results. So it would be very, very helpful for us to understand. On the panel you came back with is the bottom area there, which is feedback. And then it'll ask you questions about what do you think, would you come again? And the sorts of gems we're after is, should we come back? So this was the last event for Spark Lab in Dunedin for this trip. If we were to come back, who should we come back with? Are there topics you'd like to know about? Do you think if we did it differently, we could get different sorts of people? Should we come for 4 days, not one? So please do take the opportunity. It will take you no more than a minute before leaving, and it's completely implicit in a lot of what Sir Ray's been talking about this evening. For those that are motivated by carrots, there is a carrot. There is a $250 Lucky Spark voucher or incentive for a lucky person in the audience to be able to do that. So thank you once again for braving it this evening. For those that have come 3 times today, it's a wonderful appreciation to you. And once again, if you could join me in thanking Sir Ray. Thank you very much.